fish on?
Oh yes, there's a fish on. There's a fish on. There's a very gentle take.
Yeah, there is a fish on. That's a fish. It's a fish on.
Fish on!
Fish on. Fish on. That is a fish on. That's a fish on. That's a fish on. Fish on. Hey, fish off.
Hello everyone! Today we're tackling some cookery that many people often struggle with. Fish. I'll be going over what to look for when shopping for it, how to break it down, and going over a few simple ways to prepare it. Now, let's get into it. Alright, so here I have a barramundi, also known as Asian sea bass, a very common fish here in Australia, but not so much in other places. But the nice thing about fish is that they're somewhat similar. So the same techniques can be applied to pretty much any whole fish we commonly find, no matter where we are, whether it's barramundi, trout, tilapia, salmon, etc. Now when you're sourcing fish, there's a few things to look out for so you can better determine its quality and freshness. First, bright, clear, and glossy eyes that aren't sunken or cloudy. Second, bright red gills. These ones were nice and red before my fishmonger took them out. Third, firm flesh that bounces back. If it isn't firm, that could signify illness or something else that could reduce the quality of your fish. And last, a fresh smell is usually a very, very important signifier when it comes to seafood. Fish really shouldn't smell fishy. It should smell at most like the ocean. Most fish you'll encounter have scales. Usually when you're buying fish, these will be removed for you, as well as the guts. But scaling is still a good skill to know how to do because sometimes they miss spots. So let's get that out of the way first. The scales of a fish run from its head to its tail. So to remove them, we want to scrape these off in the opposite direction. So, using the back end of a knife, we're going to make some firm but controlled scrapes along the fish, going from the tail towards the head. This will dislodge the scales, and running water should carry most of them away. See? Alright, so now we're ready to fillet our fish. Something that'll make this whole process a lot easier is your knife. Preferably a sharp, thin, and flexible one, like this fillet knife. Fitting name, right? But most knives will work for the most part. You may just need to take a little extra care while cutting if you don't have a specialized knife designed for the job. The way I like to begin is up here where the head meets the body of the fish, around here. We'll make a small incision and cut down behind the pectoral fin, and in front of the pelvic fin. This will separate this section, called the collar, from the head and the rest of the fillet. Now we'll start removing the fillet by cutting up here, down along the spine, to separate it from the rib cage, which runs down the center of the fish. So, keeping our knife snug against the rib cage, we'll carefully scrape the fillet away from it. I'll open the fish up so you can see what I mean. I'm not really cutting the flesh of the fish, really more just scraping off the bone in the center here with almost a flicking motion of the knife. There really shouldn't be too much resistance, although depending on your fish, you may run into some hair-like pin bones as you cut. Just go right through them for now, we'll worry about them later. Just keep working down towards that belly, and then finish up at the tail. And there you go, a fillet. I'm going to slice off this belly here because there's not really much going on with it on a barramundi, but with some other fish, like salmon, they have a lot of delicious meat on their belly, so keep that in mind. We'll just trim off this little extra bit of skin on the tail, and that's it. Another nice thing about barramundi is that they don't have many pin bones, which are very thin bones that point out horizontally from the ribcage in many fish. Most fish do have them, so to find them, run your fingers along these lateral lines in the fillet, you'll feel them, then pluck them out with tweezers. Alright, so I've repeated the same process on the other side of the fish, and now we have two fillets, or two collars, the head, and the carcass. Now, don't just toss these just yet. I'll show you a few things you can do with them. But first, depending on how well you filleted the fish, there might be some meat still on the bones. So the best way to get it all off is by scraping it off with a spoon. Ideally, you shouldn't need to scrape off that much, it should just be on the fillet. But if you do, it's perfectly good meat, so why waste it? I like using it for tartare or fried fish cakes. Now with these scraps and bones, we're going to make a simple stock. We'll just put them in some water and get them on the stove or medium-low heat for about half an hour. You could add aromatics, spices, all that jazz, but it's really not necessary. This is a great way to utilize not just these fish bones, but really any bones or kitchen scraps you have in general. You paid for those bones, scraps, roots, and stems, so get your value out of them. So, what about the skin? Personally, I love fish skin, but I know a lot of people don't, and some cooking methods aren't ideal with it left on, so let's go over skinning. Again, using our beautifully bendy fillet knife, or whatever you're working with, we'll make a little incision right here between the flesh and the skin on one end. This is to start us out with something to hold on to. Now, while holding the little skin tab you've just made, using your knife at a 30-degree angle, we're just going to shimmy the knife carefully down the fillet. You should be able to get the skin off all in one piece. Whew, alright, I know that was a lot, but there's a lot to know about working with fish. Now we're ready to get into some actual cooking techniques. We'll start with the majorly underrated and underutilized, steaming, or more specifically, en papillote. That's French for enveloped in paper. This method involves sealing our fish in a paper or foil, or both for added security, pouch. This allows the fish to steam in its own juices, maintaining its natural flavor and moisture. So we have similarly sized pieces of baking paper and foil, which I'll put our fish on. Then we're going to seal our pouch by crimping the edges tightly. You want to leave a hole at the end here, because we're going to add some flavorings, as well as some of our fish stock, which I've strained. Then we can just twist it off to close it up. We'll just pop this in a preheated oven at around 200 degrees Celsius for about 15 minutes, depending on the size of your fish. My favorite part about this technique is getting struck with all the aromas when you finally cut into the pouch. So let's do that and see how we did. As you can see, the fish is super moist and tender. It's quite literally falling apart. And it's swimming in a pool of the most amazing broth. It's absorbed all the flavors from those aromatics and seasonings I added. This with a little bit of rice to pour those juices over, it's just too good for how easy it was. As always, I'll put the ingredients I used in the description below. But there are so many different ways to flavor your fish using this technique, using whichever ingredients and flavor profiles most resonate with you. Now, for our second preparation, we'll roast the fish. You're raw and lack any seasoning. So to address this problem, I've made a simple marinade with maple syrup, thyme, some salt, and some black pepper. On a lined and oiled baking tray, we'll get our fish into a preheated oven at 200 degrees Celsius, that's 400 degrees Fahrenheit, preferably with the fan on, for anywhere to 10 to 15 minutes, depending on the thickness of your fish. Again, internal temperature is the best way to gauge your cooking time, so keep your thermometer handy. With fish, my sweet spot is around 133 degrees Fahrenheit, or 56 degrees Celsius. That leaves it just a little opaque in the middle, just how I like it. This piece went for roughly 11 minutes, and I brushed the leftover marinade I had onto the fish about halfway through. It's flaky, but still very juicy and succulent, and just full of flavor. Now, health departments will tell you that fish should be cooked to 145 degrees Fahrenheit. That's 63 degrees Celsius, but any chef will tell you that's a bunch of baloney. It's a bunch of baloney. Doing that is a surefire way to end up with dry fish, because they don't take into consideration that most foods carry over cook, meaning that their internal temperature will continue to rise for a few degrees even after they've been removed from a heat source. So it's best to stop cooking things just a little before your desired temperature. When marinating fish I intend to roast, I really like incorporating just a little bit of sugar. It caramelizes while the fish cooks, forming a nice glaze over it which helps it retain moisture, while giving us some nice crispy bits around the edges, and some much needed color. Most marinades can impart good flavor in fish as little as half an hour. You really don't want to go much longer than that because you could actually end up chemically cooking the fish if you did. Alright, our third and last cooking method is going to be the one that gives people the most trouble: pan searing. It sticks, it's overcooked, it's undercooked, there's all sorts of things that can go wrong. But I'm going to show you how to avoid them all, and make this whole process foolproof. Not to say you're a fool or anything, you're here learning valuable cooking skills, so you have that going for you. One of the biggest fixes to everyone's pan searing woes is what I'm doing right here: patting the surface of the fish dry before cooking it. Excess moisture on the surface of the fish stops it from making good contact with our oil and our pan, which can prevent it from achieving a great crust. That crust isn't just about looking and tasting good, it actually helps prevent the fish from sticking. I'm just going to keep my seasoning real simple with some salt and pepper. This barramundi is a more mild tasting fish, so I don't really want to cover it up with too many strong flavors. But something like salmon has a much bolder flavor, so it can handle heavier seasoning. Now, something we need to go over before we start pan searing is temperature. This is where most people run into problems. Their pan simply isn't hot enough. But how can we tell? Well, there's a cool trick for that. It's called the lead-in frost effect. Here I have a dry pan over medium-high heat, and it's been on there for a couple minutes. Now, when I add just a tiny bit of water, you'll notice these little beads that shoot around the pan. You would normally expect the water to vaporize instantly, right? But it doesn't. The pan is so much hotter than the boiling point of water that the steam produced actually protects the rest of the water above it from also immediately turning into steam and going away, allowing it to skate across the surface. We can use the lead-in frost effect to allow our fish to also skate across the surface of our pan. So we'll go in with a little oil and then get our fish into the pan skin side down. But now we're just going to leave it alone. I know it's tempting, but don't touch it. It needs time to really allow that crust to set up. But once it does, it slides around effortlessly. And this is just a normal steel pan, mind you. No special nonstick coating, nothing like that. As fish cooks, it changes color, so we can use this to better judge how our fish is coming along. You'll see here how the bright white cooked part of the fish is just starting to creep up the side of the fillet. We want this to come up about 1/3 of the way, and then we're ready to flip. Look at that. Beautiful crispy skin. We'll just let this go for a few minutes until we see that coloration make its way up the other side. I'm going to add just a little butter and turn down the heat to low. This is going to add some great flavor, but also act as the base of a simple pan sauce. This is looking perfect, so I'll remove it to whip up a nice little sauce quick with that brown butter, using some parsley, lemon, and our fish stock. We'll just pour over our sauce, and look at that. This came out incredible. The skin is crispy, the fish itself is very juicy and flavorful, and the sauce just adds the right amount of fat, acidity, and freshness to bring it all together. So, I hope this helps dispel some of the intimidation people have working with fish. Each one of these preparations took about 15 minutes of actual cooking, starting with a fillet of course, but even breaking down the whole fish really isn't that complicated. If this video helped you feel a little bit more confident about working with fish, you can let me know in the comments, or just show me by liking and subscribing. I'd like to thank everyone for watching till the end, and just for your continued support of my channel. And as always, thanks for watching.